circumstances where you have to make a choice between doing the right thing or not. And I said, that's really where it's developed. Now, what we could do, we could polish that a little bit, because in our business, the business of being a prosecutor, this whole issue then again about being a truth teller is really important. That you told the truth to jurors, that you told the truth to judges, to defense attorneys. The whole system of plea bargaining, at the core of it was that the prosecutor would tell the truth about that. And if the prosecutor didn't, really, I promise you, the system erodes from the inside. It's corrosive and rusted and will break apart like anything that is rusted or corroded will do. And so we used to talk about that with these applicants and say, there's a true north. There is an internal compass you have that will point you to true north, and the most important thing is that you have it, and then we can help train it a little bit in the world of prosecution, and then you have to obey it. Those are the three things, right? That you have this for, that it's trained. You've done a lot to train it up to this point, and then we can, again, polish upon that, but then you have to obey it. And you absolutely know that you're not obeying. I mean, you just do. And people who say, well, this was a tough one, yeah, maybe things are tough, but at the end of the day, you really do have a sense about that. And you see it in the world of prosecution, you have an ethical responsibility to dismiss a case you have some doubt yourself about, or that you doubt about your ability to prove. There's an article just in the paper yesterday about a district attorney's office dismissing a murder case, and I have so many sympathies for that, because the victim's family and the police are saying, we're really disagreeing with it. Some prosecutors sat down, and I believe, probably said, I can't meet my ethical responsibility of believing, honestly believing that I can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury of 12 people unanimously. And then he had a duty to dismiss it. So I sat with victim family members and sat across the table from them, where people were so passionate about us going forward, eking out some justice for the victim, often the homicide victim. So it's a murder case. And saying either we filed it and the evidence is weakened, we can't go forward, or we've done our investigation, we believe we know what it is, we can't prosecute this. We cannot go forward in the prosecution of this, and have to tell that the family members who really want justice for their loved ones in a courtroom. That's a difficult thing to do. But you only get there to that place where you're able to do that because you've done it on the little things. And maybe integrity goes, this is the most important point, is that you can't compromise the little stuff and think that you're going to then behave differently when it gets to the big stuff. Back when, just to borrow from my experience as a DA, you start out in county court, handling tons of cases. And, it really is this unbearable caseload. And they're mostly DUIs and misdemeanor offenses, but, you're there, and in truth, it's again your currency, and you're talking to these defense attorneys, and you know about things in the evidence, and sometimes not in the written part of it, but you have an obligation as a district attorney, as a prosecutor, to turn over anything that could be, show that there's some degree of innocence, or that could lessen the culpability of the defendant. And you have that obligation the very first day you're a prosecutor. And so you have to, make sure that you don't try and take cut corners or take shortcuts to the truth or whatever. And so it becomes instinctive. And I saw this a bunch of times. I was trying this murder case with the guy who's now the district attorney. But at the time, we were both chief deputies. And we, the whole thing was a long and involved deal. But there was some issue about whether the locks in this car worked automatically or you had to do it manually. None of us had ever looked at it. And it would have helped us if it was a manual. And it did not help us if it was an automatic. The detective out said, go out and test that car. And he came back the following Monday morning, because on the weekend he said, whatever it was automatic. He said, yeah, the battery is, on and stuff. They work, the automatic, locks work, they work this way. Well, I've heard it. This guy and I both instinctively turned to the defense attorney, there were two of them on this murder case, and we said, we did a little thing over the weekend. There was a demonstration, and here's what happened, and it helped them. Well, they went in the case, but we never looked at each other and said, should we tell them? It was just this instinct where we had both been trained from our earliest days that truth matters. And I use the justice system as an example because it really is one of the greatest ways to talk about where truth is fundamental to the great operation. And there are a lot of people say, well, truth isn't fundamental to building a house, or I'd argue it is. But it's really apparent in the justice system because liberty hangs in the balance for people who decide to tell the truth or not. And so now I'm governor, and I borrow from my experiences professionally and personally every day as governor, where it really is important to look at people and say, I'm with you on this bill, I'm not with you on this bill, I'm going to veto this if it gets to my desk, I'm going to fight it if it gets to my desk, because my credibility really can determine so much in how people behave in the legislature and what they bring to me. They're all independent thinkers, they're all people who have their own way of doing things, but I have to sign or veto every bill that comes before me, or some bills. It also, people just attach to the language of the governor. I said this week that the $300 million cut to higher ed was unacceptable. Unacceptable. And people take that word acceptable and said, if you tell them the truth about that, that means we have to find other alternatives. And so if I was just out there and I was just posturing so that I could come here to you and be happy that I said that we're going to cut higher ed, that's one thing, right? Because nobody really believes it. You don't get the real work done. They believe it. And you have credibility, and the real work goes forward. And so for me, this whole notion of integrity is so wound up in developing trust in relations, and being a truth teller, and really a truth speaker, and a person who listens as much as possible. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and